Hi, all. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Boston Art Commission. My name is Alexandra Polzotov, and I'm the Public Art Registrar within the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. In that capacity, I'm also the Administrator of the Boston Art Commission. Let's take a moment to update our names and pronouns, as well as make sure we are all muted. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. As a reminder, this is extended until 2025. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Boston Art Commission, the public can join this meeting through telephone and video conferencing. For those of you with us today, this meeting is being recorded and closed captioning is available. You may access it at the bottom of the screen. If you are having trouble locating the button, please chat us for assistance.
Thank you so much, Paul. And thanks everyone for being here. Apologies for the late start. We were working toward a quorum today, so we really appreciate you being here. The Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture and the Boston Art Commission believe that public art is any artwork installed in publicly accessible spaces where they can be experienced by everyone for free. For transparency and community input, artworks proposed for City of Boston property are reviewed and discussed at public meetings of the Boston Art Commission on a regular and usually monthly basis, like today. Working together with the public art team and the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, the BAC is an independent board composed of 2 ex officio and 7 volunteer community members appointed by the mayor. The BAC has exclusive authority to approve and commission artworks intended to be added to the city's collection or placed on city property. Our team in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture facilitates these meetings, manages all phases, daily operations, and duties related to public art projects cited on or proposed for city property in collaboration with the Boston Art Commission, community members, colleagues at the City of Boston as well. And helping to facilitate this meeting are Amber Torres, Public Art Project Manager, Alexandra Polzotov, Public Art Registrar, and Birgit Worster, Senior Public Art Project Manager. And we will drop in an email, bac@boston.gov, for you to reach out to us with if you have any questions. Also want to note that our work is really supported by some other folks, including Emily Rose Navarro, who's a full-time employee in our office, the Transformative Art and Monuments Project Coordinator, and also some consultants, Liza Quinones, who works with us on murals, Josh Crane, who works with us on conservation, and Erin Genia, our Indigenous public art and public art and spaces consultant.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're having a nice December and staying warm. I call this public hearing to order at 5:04 p.m. Today, the Commission is holding its monthly public meeting, and our meetings are generally held on the second Tuesday of every month, and we hope you'll continue to join us. Here at the BAC, we engage in discussions about public art in Boston in order to foster the creation and collection of artworks that reflect the people, ideas, histories, and futures of Boston, which is located on the traditional homeland of the Massachusetts people and the neighboring Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples. We acknowledge the atrocities committed against Indigenous peoples, all of the communities that have been subsequently harmed, and the ways in which colonialism has created systemic oppression. We recognize the continuing presence of these communities and the Indigenous peoples represented in the city's residents, in addition to those in the diaspora. We also recognize that Boston exists as a result of the forced labor and economic extraction from enslaved African Americans. I'll now take roll call of commissioners to confirm a quorum. Commissioner, after I state your name, please say here. I begin with Vice Chair James Mason.
Here.
Diana Fernandez-Bibo.
Here.
Brian Hone.
Here.
I don't believe, Nigel, are you here? And Abigail Norman.
Here.
Great, so we have a quorum and can continue. I'll pass it back to Karen for just one moment. Oh, no, I have to do minutes, sorry. Apologies. Oh, nope, Karen, I'm passing it to you. My bad.
That's okay. We just want to take a moment and share that Cara Elliott Ortega, who had been the Chief of Arts and Culture in the Mayor's at the City of Boston and the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and also a commissioner here with the Boston Art Commission, has, after 9 years of service to the city of Boston, moved on to another opportunity. So she is no longer going to be with us in our work in Boston, has moved on to Detroit, where she'll be doing some exciting things. So we just want to take a moment and honor her contributions and say thanks. She's not here, but we have expressed this and just wanted to make sure that you all knew. I think for the commissioners, she shared this news with you already. For everyone else, just wanted to let you know. And we are in the process of looking to have her interim replacement take her seat. So we're hoping that in the new year that will happen.
Thanks so
And I
much,
will
Karen.
pass it back
And
to you.
of course, thanks to Kara for all of her work and advocacy for the arts here in Boston. On this slide, you will see today's agenda, which is also posted publicly on the city's website, boston.gov. And now we'll review meeting minutes from the November meeting. Do any commissioners have comments or modifications you'd like to make? Well, in that case, would any commissioner like to make a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the November 12th minutes.
Thanks, Brian. Do I have a second?
Yes, I second.
Thanks, James. After I say your name, please say yes if you approve of the motion. James,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Abigail,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. The motion passes. I'll now turn it to Karen Goodfellow for her director's report.
Thank you, John. So we have a few presentations for review today. The first one that we'll be looking at is from Brookley Flats, which is a long-term artwork. I do want to note that this project is not being presented for a vote. This is not City of Boston property, but that will be for final design, and it will be an artwork in Jamaica Plain by artist Liz Lamanche, and presented by Lina Jimenez Mejia from Causeway Development. After that, we have Black Forest from the Public Art Triennial. This is a long-term artwork in Dorchester by artist Ekene Ijeoma, and will be presented by Leo Crowley of the Boston Public Art Triennial. We're also going to see some projects from the Downtown Boston Alliance, formerly known as the BID, for their Winteractive exhibition this year, including Living Lantern, which is a temporary artwork for final design, which will be downtown at Shoppers Plaza. And the artist is NEON Studio and Frankie Boyle. We have a few others. We have Alouette, also by the Downtown Boston Alliance, and it will be by artist Brandon Vickerd, and that'll be on Washington Street, also downtown. And we have Heroes, a long-term mural, which is going to be part of the Canvas of Culture initiative put forward by our office. And this will be in East Boston by artist Sophy Tuttle, and that will be presented by Street Theory. And DeWitt Playground is our last one, and we've seen this one before. As some of you might remember, this is a long-term integrated artwork. We're really excited for this project to come back. There's some design updates that will be shared. The artists are the P.L.A.Y team, Marlon, Forrester, and Studio Loose, and that will be shared by Birgit Worster from the City of Boston. Other updates that we have on projects include Call and Response, Radiating Safety by Lamarchi Frazier and Ralph Helmick for Firehouse 42 in Eggleston Square. They've completed lighting testing, and the sculpture has been safely stored for installation in early spring 2025. And before the holiday, we selected a vinyl company to print and install Destiny Palmer's mural for Vine Street BCYF in Roxbury, and we're currently working with our A&F team to have the contract awarded before the new year and have your artwork installed also in early 2025. Lighting designs for City Hall Plaza revolving sculpture program are in development, and we are working closely with the City of Boston Property Management Department, along with artist Ria Vedro and her project team, to prepare the site for the inaugural sculpture Amulet by Ria, as well as future works for the program site. And in November, all of the Copley Square project artists attended a site visit to the park, which is currently under construction. They were there with public art project managers Amber Torres and Birgit Worster, and with the Parks Department's project manager B. Chatfield. The artists are currently refining their specific site selection within the park and developing preliminary designs. And then just some updates on the collection. We are going some records digitization. I will say all this work is here being led by Public Art Registrar P.L.A.Y. The microfilm assessment of 1890 to the 1950s and the 90s, which was done by the Smithsonian through the Save Our Sculptures SOS program. As part of that work, they made microfilm copies of Boston Art Commission records through 1950 in collaboration with the City Archive, who currently hold the microfilm in their care at Rivermore, which is in West Roxbury. It's a really fascinating location if you've never been there. They will do an assessment of the collection to provide an estimate of cost to digitize and make the records available online. This will include the records having optical character recognition, OCR capabilities to allow researchers and users alike to search by query and keyword. We'll then use this assessment to apply for archival grants. As part of their digital access initiative, the remaining physical files from 1950 on will be organized by city archives in order to create a finding guide. This will then allow them to assess the condition of the files and advise on budget and timeline for their digitization and onboarding into citywide archive repository. We're grateful for the collaboration and guidance from our colleagues in archives, Kayla Skillen and Kristen Lafferty, and from our team, Paul Zotov. On the public art map, we've been working in collaboration with DeWitt to create user testing feedback groups to gather information about the map and use it to improve our V2, version 2, to take place in the new year. We're really trying to get this online because we're expecting a lot of need and demand for the map this summer with both the Triennial and Unmonument happening. For citywide art collection conservation, with winter upon us, we'll be strategizing with Daedalus Conservation on any additional conservation initiatives we want to work on in the upcoming season. And lastly, Webster's Reply to Hayne by George P.A. Healy, the large painting in Faneuil Hall in the Great Hall there. Visitors are still welcome to drop in to see conservation when the hall is open. And Paul, again, has been working along with Birgit Worster and the property management team to work with a structural engineer to study the wall behind the painting and assess its ability to support the reinstallation of the painting. So wanting to be really careful as it is an old and important building and ensure that we're able to install it safely, both for the painting and the building and obviously for people. And that's it. Thank you, John.
Thanks so much, Karen. The BAC archive information sounds fascinating, and I hope that assessment helps us get funding, because I bet there's some really fascinating things in that, in those files. We'll now move on to
There are so many sassy letters, John. I'll just say, and I'm sure Paul could speak to many. There are so many sassy letters, and there's like consistency, like, no, we can't do that, we have no money, or like they're amazing when you get to go and read them.
Amazing. We'll now move on to the items on agenda for review, public testimony, and commission vote. On the screen, you'll see how you can participate in today's meeting. If you have technical difficulties, you can ask questions in the chat and a member of staff will help you. When public testimony is requested, you can press the raise your hand icon and we'll call on you. If you're calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. Our goal is to make this meeting a good experience for all. Please remember to keep your comments on topic, brief, and respectful of others. And you can submit longer written testimony to bac@boston.gov. If you're called on, please state your name, title, program, and organization, if relevant. And before we move on to tonight's agenda items, I'd also like to take a few minutes to open it up to anyone here on the call for general questions about the BAC, the Office of Arts and Culture, or any of the projects that we will be discussing today or have presented in the past. So I open it up. If you'd like to ask a question, please unmute yourself and ask away. Anyone have a question? I guess not at today's meeting. I know that we don't always have questions here, but I do think it's good practice for us to keep this space open in case any questions do come up that may not be covered in today's agenda. So thank you. Our first project for discussion will be introduced by Amber Torres. And so Amber, I pass it off to you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. The presentation you're about to see is within the context of a larger conversation between the Planning Department and MOAC around the Planning Department's policy, process, and guidance when it comes to public art on privately owned buildings or sites. I should reiterate that this is a project that does not require BAC vote. We want to encourage the inclusion of art in these spaces, and we're currently developing clear policy, process, and guidance to support projects in service of this. So please keep sending public art projects on private development our way. It's great to see what is going on in our city across all aspects of public art. At this point, I'll pass it off to Lina Jimenez Mejia to speak more about this project.
Thank you, Amber. And just a clarification, I work with JPNDC, who's a nonprofit organization, not with Causeway. Causeway is our co-developer. I want to start thank you everyone for the Boston Art Commission, the staff, the commissioners, and everyone for the community at large for allow us to present our project today. So Brooklyn Flat is 45 affordable condominium units. Once completed, is going to be the largest affordable condominium project in Boston. And as I say, it's been undertaken by JPNDC and Causeway. We have 45 units, 5 of which are artist unit, and the project is located on the corner of Brooklyn Road and Stony Road. It's just 10 minutes away from Forest Hill. Because this is a homeownership, affordable homeownership, the sale is a little different, and we need to do a lottery. So we have more than 1,000 applicants for the lottery, and we are now starting vetting those potential buyers to select them. Next. So this is the ground floor. So we have 6 units in the first floor. 5 of them are the artist unit. We have also like a gallery space for people and the artists to work and exhibit the artwork. We have the garage and the bike storage. The mural is going to be located on the shop for the stairwells. Next. Next. This is the view from Washington Street. The mural is going to be digital printed on the screen. It's going to be like a billboard and will be installed on the building before units are sold. The mural will be owned by the condo association, so they're going to be responsible for maintaining. The printed mural has a warranty of 7 years, but the vendor said that we can reasonably anticipate a life expectancy of 9 to 12 years, so we don't anticipate any problems in the first 10 years of the building. The mural is going to be installed 9 feet above the sidewalks, so this minimizes the possibility of vandalism. Because this is a private development, the city is not involved in any kind with the maintenance of the mural. So how we select the artist? So we issue a request for proposal in June, and the proposal was due in July. We send the request for proposal directly to more than 86 different artists and groups. And we also publish on our JPNDC social media, and we also send emails to people who could help us distributing the RFP, like State Rep San Antonio, Jamaica Plain Artists Association, Stony Brook Association, MOAC, and Mass Cultural Council. The proposal, we wanted to keep it simple, so the artist didn't have to invest a lot of time and money develop the proposal. We just asked for the portfolio, the resume, the experience, how they outline the development of the design. We asked if they have any diversity and inclusion plan and an estimated budget. And our selection criteria was the familiarity for the artist with Jamaica Plain and the site, experience managing public artworks, design process, timeline, and budget. So we create a committee to select the artists. They were different people. There was San Antonio, who's a state rep, the architect. We have a photographer. We have Robert Torres, who is the director of community benefits of Beth Israel. He also has worked in urbanization, the community engagement department, and he also lives in the area. And we have also Jennifer, who is a community member, a member of SNA. We received 7 proposals in total, and in the committee we rank them, and we decide to interview 3 artists or groups, and we select Neighbor West as our designer, and Liz Lamanche is part of that team. So how we have a right here. So once we engage Neighbor Ways, we start collecting ideas, stories, so concepts, so Liz can develop the design and create some proposals to show. In November 13, we have our first community meeting that people were really happy with the option we presented. And today we have an online survey so people can keep giving us feedback on the options that Liz has developed. So the idea is in January, finalize the concept and have a final presentation to the community of our design and install the mural at the end of January before people move in. Liz, do you want to talk about the engagement?
Yeah, we did a couple of different pop-ups in the neighborhood where we tabled or interviewed people as to what they wanted to see, what they thought about their neighborhood, any stories that they had, history, and their visions of the future of the neighborhood. We also put out flyers and let people know about a public meeting and an online form that they could fill out for ideas and feedback. So we tried to find people in any way that we could, and a number of different ways to get a cross section of the neighbors. From the online questionnaire, this was a word cloud of what people wanted to see and what they enjoyed about their neighborhood. A lot of it was about access to green space, proximity to the parks, walkability, family-friendly neighborhood, community and people, and some other things like arts, local business, things you see here. We also heard from people that I talked to on the street. They wanted something colorful, good art, and that they really appreciate the street life and the family and community-oriented nature of the place. We've also heard about the gardens, the community gardens, the fact that people have things growing on their front porches, the uniqueness of people's houses and front porches. So there's a lot of good things going on there. I used to run a circus practice in Jamaica Plain for 7 years, and I have a lot of friends there. So it's been great to be immersed in the neighborhood again. So you see here the 3 designs that we came up with. These were the result of narrowing down like 8 or 10 of them that I had started with. We did some internal meetings, chose the best ones, and these are the ones that came up at our first public meeting where we got more ideas, feedback. People liked the colors, the natural botanical nature of these, and we also got some other suggestions. So I took these back for an additional round, and that's we extended our timeline a little bit, and that's under public voting right now. That's up on a website. I can get more feedback. Here they are. These are a little bit, the colors are muted in the way that the files got transferred. They have brighter coloration like the ones you saw on the previous screen, but they're basically 3 different themes. One is like arts and nature with the hand of the artist, and also music. The second one is like the garden and nature, and these are flowers representing some of the different cultures that are also represented in the neighborhood according to our community feedback. And this is about the community gardens and also music and the type of neighborhood housing that people are used to seeing here. Lena, are you going to?
So that is
Yeah,
what we have
that's-
prepared for today. I don't know if people have questions.
Well, Lena and Liz, thank you so much for the presentation. And
Sure.
I, for one, really appreciate you bringing this to the BAC for discussion and review. I know it's not necessarily for a vote, but I do appreciate you bringing this to us. I'll now open it up to commissioners with any questions they may have.
I'll just say I live in the neighborhood and I
Mhm.
appreciate the designs. They're very pretty and I look forward to seeing one of them around.
So you can vote.
Yeah, that's my comment. Thank you. It's nice to see lots of options and kind of different iterations on the design, and to see the community having a role to play in choosing the final image. That's something that we don't always see. So just congrats to the artist team and all of the folks who are engaged with the project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm putting the final version of the feedback form that's on our website in the chat. Especially, we want to hear from people who live in and near the neighborhood.
Well, that's great, Liz.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners?
Liz, could I ask a follow-up question as it relates to the material? So did I hear correctly that it would be vinyl? Could you talk a little bit about durability of how you intend this to sort of engage with the architecture and the materials that you've identified here?
Partly that's Lena's department, because they were driving the choice of materials and vendors. But one thing to note is that this is not a south-facing wall, so I don't believe it's going to get a lot of direct sunlight. That should make it hold its color even better. And other than that, I mostly know about what she said about the recommendation from the vendor.
So yes, as Liz mentioned, this is going to be like a billboard, or like I say in my presentation, this is going to be like a billboard. And the vendor had said that it has a guarantee of 7 years, but that is reasonable to anticipate that the reasonable life expectancy is between 9 and 12 years. We also, as a developers, are planning to leave a reserve in the condo budget to replace the mural in 10 years. But after that is the condo association who's going to be responsible to replace it if they want to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lena. Just to follow up on that really quickly, and then I can open it up to the general public. With that 10-year lifespan, maybe I'm getting too far ahead of myself, but once it moves to the responsibility of the condo association, they would be responsible for, if they chose to select another artist or create another mural, that would be up to them.
Yes, well,
Okay.
we are going to leave them the file that Liz creates. So in the case they just want to replace it with the same, so it's going to be it's cheaper. If they want to run a process, that is on them. They have the advantage that we have 5 artists live in the project, so maybe one of them decide to be creative and convince the other 44 units to allow them to put the mural there. So, but they have the final decision because it's a condominium, so they're entitled to is the property. The good thing is that we have designed the mural in a way that if they want, the building can live without the mural. So if the mural need to be taken out to replace it and take some time, the building can live without the mural, and it's not going to be an issue. But we hope that because it's a nice work of art, is going to last there for the years to come.
Thanks so much, Lena. I'll now open it up to any members of the public who'd like to make a comment or ask a question.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Oh, sure, James, go ahead.
My question is, with such a wonderful, colorful mural that will be on the outside of the building, and I know that these are condos and will be owned by private citizens, is there an area inside the building that more artwork or mural, another mural can make a connection to the outside?
We have some area, but at this moment we haven't thought of including more art in the inside of the building. We have a community space that is going to be served for the artists to present their work, but we haven't think on a specific work of art inside of the building. We want this to be more for the community, and the mural was part of our community benefits when we received approval by the BPDA.
Yeah, they have the community programmable space, and I believe there are also some really nice teal accent walls here and there.
Yes.
So there is some color going on.
It's on color, but it's not an art specifically. It's going to be more vague, like.
Well, Lena and Liz, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. Best of luck with the design vote. I hope you get a lot of responses. And again, we so appreciate you bringing this to the BAC, and good luck with the installation of the mural. I'm sure it's going to look beautiful. Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much.
We'll now move on to our next project for review, Black Forest by Ekene Ijeoma, a long-term proposal for Lesh Family Park in Dorchester, proposed by the Boston Public Art Triennial. Karen Goodfellow will introduce the next project.
Thank you, John. Last month, the Boston Public Art Triennial presented the artist selection process for the Boston Public Art Triennial coming to the city next year, very soon, which will bring several temporary art installations to Boston, as well as one long-term installation entitled Black Forest. This piece, Black Forest, returns to the BAC today for preliminary design approval. We did want to share that we have not yet received the conditional approval we requested from the Parks Department before this meeting. Director of Capital Plan for Parks, Kathy Baker Eclipse, is also in conversation with the Triennial and shared that there are some design revisions underway that we'd like to review prior to conditional approval. The Parks Department had shared concerns regarding the impact of the artwork on root growth and movement, as well as questions about long-term maintenance. For this reason, we expect that the Triennial will speak to these design revisions today, and that should the BAC approve this proposal or the stage of this proposal, that they might recommend approval pending the conditional approval of the Parks Department. Our project managers will continue to work with the Parks Department and the Triennial team on design revisions that address these concerns in time for their final design presentation to the BAC. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to the Triennial team to present. I think we have Leo Crowley. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you all tonight. As Karen mentioned, we're here as the second stage of this approval process for the long-term artwork by Ekene Ijeoma. Next slide, please. This is Ekene Ijeoma. He's a Brooklyn-based artist with strong ties to the Boston area, having taught at MIT for years. His work deals with data studies and life experiences using computational design to reframe social issues that embody overlooked truths within systems of oppression. Next slide, please. This work is part of his ongoing work, Black Forest, which is a living monument that involves the planting of trees to commemorate Black lives lost to COVID-19, with a lens on the disparate rates that the Black community faced during that pandemic. Next slide, please. Here you see a rendering of the sculptural seating area. This is a new component that Ekene has is proposing for the 2025 Triennial edition of Black Forest. In 2023, Ekene had a tree planting in Loesch Park where he planted 12 trees as part of his previous Black Forest work. And so he would like to return to this site and install a sculptural seating area that will create a gathering space for reflection and community connection. Our vision is for this piece to be presented as a 10-year term, extending long past the triennial closing date. We are working with Speak for the Trees in order to assess the most ideal tree and location for this piece. We have selected a tree that we believe would benefit from this piece. It's our intention and Ekene's desire that this piece not only be a beautiful space of reflection for the community, but it also be functional and take into consideration the fact that this is being installed around a living organism, which we in no way want to endanger. And so with Speak for the Trees guidance, they have helped us pick a tree that is mature enough that it would not suffer from any human interaction of people sitting on the bench, while also being a bit protected, the fragile root systems from one of the biggest threats to newly planted trees, which is dog urine and pedestrian damage. Next slide, please. Here you see the location at Loesch Park, the tree circled there. This location is at the nexus of two walking paths, both of which come from the main street, which have pedestrian cutouts ensuring accessibility. Next slide, please. And here again, we see another rendering with an engineering look at the top and another view of the site on the bottom. Next slide, please. This is a site survey as we went down to assess the tree and the site and think through installation and how that might look if we are granted approval. This was provided by BRM Production Management, our partner on this and all of our triennial projects. Next slide, please. Some specifications about the sculptural seating area. It is a 4 foot by 4 foot footprint. It's 2 feet by 1 inches tall. The materials are steel for the steel foundation and for the steel pipes, and the seating area is created from cut and polished field stones. Next slide, please. This is an engineering schematic that was put together for us courtesy of SGH, our engineering partner. They assess all of our projects to make sure that we are meeting safety and design requirements and that everything is engineered with the public interaction in mind. Here you can see that the foundation of this piece is perforated. That is to allow water to seep into the soil to make sure that the tree is getting the proper nutrients that it needs to get. You can also see that the arms are connected to the field stones. So in order to do that, the stones will be cut to have a flat top, but they will also be drilled out on the bottom with the rod being inserted in. Having worked previously on projects that involved rocks placed on rods, we know that there can be problems with torque and spinning. In the past, we had tried to use all manner of adhesive to prevent that from happening, and we've found them not up to the challenge of that. And so this project will involve a 2-pronged hole system. And so it'll have the main rod, which will be the support rod, but it will also feature a second hole that will be connected with steel as well. And that will eliminate the torque problem and allow for human interaction and people sitting on it without any long-term degradation of the structural integrity. Next slide, please. Here we have the stone sizing schematic. Ekene's work is really interesting. He works with computational iterations in which he feeds his design into these algorithms, and it comes back with various iterations of how that can best be manifested. And so this is his design. It looks a little bit like the tops of the trees, a cloud of tree cover, if you will. And as we're looking at here, you can see that the inner diameter as designed right now is 1 foot 8 inches. That was designed with the tree growth in mind and ensuring that the tree had plenty of room to grow over the 10-year proposed plan. Next slide, please. These are some more looks at some of the engineering drawings that we went through. Next slide, please. And again, more of the connection points. We went back and forth with the SGH to really ensure that these designs were well thought out and engineeringly sound. Next slide, please. Here we can see the second hole, which I described, being called out on the side, the little piece of butting it. Next slide, please. This is a bit more about the actual bolts used and the connections. Lots of details for those of us who are engineering minded. Next slide, please. Here's our fabrication and installation timeline. We are well underway, as you can see, with our engineering review. Ekene is at the moment assessing field stones and his shop's capabilities for drilling and inserting the arms. We have materials ready, picked out to go and ready to order, and look to begin fabrication in early 2025 in January. Ideally, the piece will be shipped to Boston in March, and then we would be looking for an early May installation, and then a tree planting ceremony, opening ceremony for the opening weekend, which is 5/22, which would be a celebration, and it would coincide with some tree planting that we'll be planning with Speak for the Trees, which would happen in the neighborhoods around the location where the bench will be. And then throughout the triennial, we will have additional tree plantings. We plan to do two tree plantings in the spring and 2 in the fall, and those will be done in concert with Speak for the Trees, who will be leading all of our, there'll be our experts in all things trees and helping us with tree selection and location and permission selection, site selection and permissions for those trees. We are joined today by David Meshalom, the executive director and co-founder of Speak for the Trees. So during the Q&A period, if there are any questions, David would be happy to speak to that. We have also, in concert with his team, identified challenges around the installation of this and making sure that the tree is well cared for and in no way endangered. We will be contracting with an arborist who will provide additional expertise. We've already discussed the fact that in order to do this safely, we will need to have a certified arborist who will use an air knife to remove the soil from around the tree without digging or damaging those roots. Part of the engineering schematics call out the fact that this structure only needs to go 2 to 3 inches into the soil. And so it'll sit on top of the roots, well above the roots, and won't have to interfere with the root ball itself. Next slide, please. This is our draft installation plan. Next slide, please. This is our maintenance plan, which will involve monthly routine maintenance. We do partner with BRM Production Management, and the Triennial team also has team members who will be dedicated to these monthly evaluations, in which we go out to the site and we check for signs of wear, damage, rust, fading. We assess the condition of the plates, the rods, the connectors, the stones, the signage, the QR codes, and the health of the tree. And this will be something, so the maintenance of the sculpture and the art piece is something that we're well acquainted with and have the expertise to handle ourselves. But we will be working with the arborist and with Todd Mister, the director of urban forestry in the city, to develop a more robust maintenance plan for the tree. So we're looking to those experts to provide us with suggestions for what that assessment checklist should look like, what type of frequency we would want to have an arborist visit and assess the condition of the tree. And then we will also have an extreme protocol in case of severe damage, graffiti, scuffs, dents, emergencies. This maintenance plan will be shared with Todd and Kathy over at the Parks Department for their approval and sign off. And when we send it, we'll also have a contact tree. So we are well aware that because this is in a park, the location, the public may see this as a park, something that the park installed. And so we want to make sure that the parks at all times has our most useful contact information so that we can respond to any public needs immediately. Next slide, please. This is an example of our didactic signage, also developed with accessibility in mind. It will have a QR code that links to an audio description that will be noted in Braille as well. Next slide, please. Our community engagement, we've already been in conversation with Cynthia Loesch Johnson, who is the president of Bold Teens. She's also a lifelong neighbor of the park and someone who has been deeply involved in the upkeep and improvement. She has provided a letter of support, which we've included with this presentation. Each tree planting will be done with the help of community volunteers under the leadership of Speak for the Trees. And we are in contact with Black musicians and vocalists who will be participating in the tree planting ceremony. Next slide, please. I believe this is the final slide. Karen, this is actually a slightly outdated deck. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the slide in which I respond to some of the concerns that Kathy and Todd Mister from the Parks Department brought up. But I have met with them already and I've heard their concerns. Ekene is very committed to this project being one that is addressing any concerns, especially to the trees. He very much wants this to be a long-term project that is mindful of the care and well-being for the tree. So he has already changed the design somewhat in reaction to Kathy and Todd's feedback. I am also developing that maintenance plan, and we'll be sharing that with them in the next few days, as well as we are doing research into the pre-existing furniture that also mirrors this configuration, and making sure that we can speak to them about the minimal impact on the tree's root ball. Excuse me.
Thanks so much, Leo. I really appreciate the presentation and learning more about this project. I now open it up to commissioners with any questions or comments they'd like to make.
I can chime in. Leo, this was a great presentation, and it's also a show of all the sort of engagement you did with the tree canopy community to ensure that this piece of art works well. Could you share a little bit more about the material expression itself and the choices there? I do think that there's something really lovely. Just, I see that this is kind of a juxtaposition, right, to the sort of like natural materials, but I do wonder if you did explore sort of, materials that were more akin, right, to sort of the natural element that you're trying to showcase as part of this installation.
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the changes that Ekene is exploring right now, originally when he presented this project, his idea was for this to be installed on a sidewalk, which is why you see the top is right now presented as a tree grate. I think very often as you walk the Boston streets, you see on sidewalks the tree grates that surround those trees there. In our conversations with Parks and with Speak for the Trees, we moved from a sidewalk location to a park location. And with this idea of a community gathering space and somebody being able to sit on the bench and reflect. And now that we are focusing on Loesch Park and on a park location, Ekene is working on designs that will not have that steel grate visible. So it'll actually be a less solid foundation that will be subterranean. It'll be about 3 inches underneath the topsoil. And so you will have grass that will grow on top of that. And these rods will go directly into the ground. And so the interesting thing when you see that design, it then very much mirrors a mini forest that's surrounding this taller tree. The selection of the flagstone was really important to Ekene. He really wanted to use a naturally occurring New England stone that was in the area to evoke that natural landscape and the use of materials from New England. We had investigated other materials doing cast concrete, which would have been frankly easier and cheaper to use. But in investigating it and looking at how that would appear, the aesthetics of it didn't match what Ekene was looking, and it didn't have that natural look. It started to look a lot more like furniture than a sculptural piece. And so that's why we've decided to go with the flagstone. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Any other commissioners? Leo, I have 2 questions. One, the rods, what material are they made of? And do you know the load-bearing weight that they can support?
Those are steel. And I do not off the top of my head know the load bearing weight, but I know that when our engineers assess all designs, they assess that anything that is made can hold up to a 300-pound human's interaction with it at its weakest point. So at this design accounts for a 300-pound human being able to interact with the weakest point. In terms of each individual rod, I cannot speak to the exact load bearing, but if that's something of interest, we can find that out.
I appreciate that. It was mostly just what weight it could support. So yeah, thanks for answering that. And then my second question is, I know that the majority of projects for the triennial will be temporary, but this one is a bit unusual. And you said that it had a 10-year term. And I was just curious to know a bit more about the maintenance plan. And because it is a 10-year term, will the triennial be responsible for upkeep? How are you thinking about this? Because it will last much longer than the initial run of the exhibition.
Thank you for your question, John. That is actually something that I did have a slide that presents. So because it is long-term, we're thinking about this in a different way. We have, for the first year of this project, we have a maintenance budget of $9,000 allocated. And then for each additional year, we have allocated $5,000 in maintenance for a total of $50,000 on top of the first year $9,000. That was that figure was arrived at thinking through what the typical maintenance for these materials would be. Steel and flagstone should have a pretty long lifespan, but we wanted to make sure that we had money to allocate to that. And also because in our really early conversations with Speak for the Trees and their team, something that they have told us is that we would want to have an arborist visit at least annually. Possibly, we're looking at the frequency for that. And one of the things that we'll be looking for is to make sure that the soil is not being compacted to a degree that would prohibit the root system from getting the nutrients that it needs. If that were to be the case, if we were seeing that compression, the thought is that we would need to kind of have an arborist come back with an air knife and loosen up that soil, and then so we would remove part of the sculpture, have that air knife used to loosen up the soil, and then reinstall. And so we want to make sure that if that were ever the case, that we have plenty of money allocated for that. I should also say that as part of this maintenance plan and as part of all of our the contract with the artist and with the city, if during the lifespan of this project that the arborists were ever to tell us that at this point the tree can no longer have this here, it's not tenable for the tree's health, then we would remove it. And so then that money that we have put in for the maintenance would then be used for the deinstallation and the removal of the project, all of which would be done in concert with the Parks Department. And we would, of course, inform the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture as well.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you.
John,
Any other question? Oh, go ahead, James.
Leo, you mentioned that the artist is rethinking and removing the grates, and I believe you said there'll be soil there, and if so, would grass be growing on that soil?
Yes. So what we would do is the current configuration, this bench can be assembled either in 2 or 4 pieces. And so when we installed, those pieces would be put in individually around the tree. We would remove the topsoil, install the sculpture, then we would re-add the topsoil, reseed it, water it, and remediate it so that the grass would be growing on top of it. So ideally, we would have time to install this bench in advance of the triennial opening weekend of 5/22, so that by the time we invited the public in to interact with it, that grass would be returned to its current condition.
So going back to the grass, I love the idea of these seats look like they're sprouting from the ground. But in maintaining the grass, how would that work? And who would be the person, like how would that work cutting grass in between those seats? And have you any concern of damaging the sculptures by continual maintenance of the grass?
Thanks, James. That's a great question. That is something that we will be working on in concert with the Parks Department to assess who's going to be how that will work with their landscaping crew, if it provides extra challenges for them. I don't believe that we'd have any concerns about the damage to the steel. The steel should be pretty robust and be able to withstand at that point, I would imagine like weed whackers or something like that being used, but that is something that we'll have to work out with our continued conversations with Todd and Kathy.
Leo, you'll get down and cut it with some scissors, right?
It would not be the first time that has happened.
If I could chime in, this is DeWitt from Speak for the Trees. I just wanted to voice our support for this project. We've worked with Ekene in the past, and he's fantastic, and we're excited for this opportunity. The park, Cynthia Lesh, who lives across the street, the park is named after her father, for those of you who know him or her. And she has a group of teens that spend a lot of time caring for the park. And our offices, our teen program over the summer also spends a lot of time at that park. So I imagine there will also be opportunities for them to learn about not only the project, but how to care for the specific art piece. And they have little hands, smaller hands than us adults do. So they might be able to get into the crevices in ways we can't.
DeWitt, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. Any other commissioners with questions or comments? I now open it up to any members of the public who'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Hearing none. Why don't I see if I can make a motion for this project?
I did see a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to say it looks beautiful, and I'm excited for the possibility of them to be coming up out of the ground visually. But either way, it seems like a delightful project. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So I move to approve the preliminary design of Ekene Ijeoma's project in the Lesh Family Park, pending conditional approval of the Parks Department. Do I have a second?
I'm happy to second this proposal.
Thanks, Abigail. Commissioners, after I say your name, please say yes if you approve of the motion. James?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Abigail?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So the motion passes. Leo, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm excited to see it installed later this spring. One thing I would share, Leo, is as you have these conversations with parks, this is preliminary design. And if major changes, which I don't expect they will, but if there are major changes to the sort of aesthetic and conceptual framework of the piece, I hope you'll work with the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture to share that with us and keep us updated, because that might challenge some of this preliminary design approval.
Absolutely.
So please keep us posted.
Bridget, Amber, and Paul have all been very helpful with these conversations, and we'll continue to keep them in the loop so that we can come back and share any news as appropriate with you all.
Thanks so much, Leo.
Thank you.
And thank you, David. Our next project for presentation is Living Lantern, a short-term installation proposed by the Downtown Boston Alliance for early 2025, and Amber Torres will introduce the project.
Some of you may remember approving a project for the inaugural Winteractive earlier this year, and we are excited to invite them back to present 2 new projects. This next project is being proposed for the same site as Echo's last year's interactive well installation. I don't know if folks remember that one. And they're back with a project for next year with yet another exciting artwork, excuse me. Let me hand it over to the Director of Special Projects, Kelsey Pramick, to present.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you all members of the commission for having me here tonight. We really appreciated the support of Echoes of Voice from Uncharted Waters last year, and I'm excited to tell you more about. I'll first go into Living Lantern and then actually one other piece for Winteractive. So some of what I'm going to talk about in the first presentation is slightly duplicative of the second. So when I go to the second, you might notice me skimming over some things that are repetitive for the sake of time. So Winteractive 2025 is the second year of our outdoor art exhibition. You can see on the right the map from last year. We had 16 pieces last year. We're still finalizing a few of the sites and pieces, but we anticipate a slightly expanded scope next year. It is an outdoor art exhibition, but what it really is for us is an economic development strategy. Our goal is to bring foot traffic to downtown Boston, drive people to shop in shops in downtown, stay in hotels, and we're seeking to promote tourism. So those are our primary overarching goals throughout this. Next slide, please. So far, since this is a new strategy to us, we're relying heavily on curatorial partnerships that are exhibiting touring works. So they come to us already produced and already showcased elsewhere with a proven track record. And we're also really leaning into the messaging of the exchange between Boston and Quebec and Canada more broadly. International tourists spend something like 4 times more than national tourists. So our goal is to drive increased tourism from Canada to come see their artworks here, stay in our hotels, and spend money. In future years, we expect a much bigger mix of local, national, and international artists. But we have this year, it's not one of the pieces being presented, but we have engaged a professor at the Boston University College of Fine Arts to make sure that we have a local voice giving the commentary on the Canada-Boston exchange. And last year we had an estimated 650,000 visitors and won Best Public Art Installation from Boston Magazine and a Social Impact Award from Boston Design Week. So Living Lantern. Living Lantern is a kinetic sculpture. It responds slightly to shifts in wind, so it slightly moves, and it also has low-level light installations at night. It's meant to be a very meditative and peaceful piece. You see it here on the right as it was shown in the heart of New York City, which was really important to us that it would stand out. Bringing light in the depths of winter is extremely important to us in these colder, darker winter months. Lanterns are also a universal symbol of brightness, transcendence, guiding light, and they're generally associated with really positive, peaceful emotions. Next, yeah. So this piece was curated in partnership with Wireframe and their curator, Alice Berthart. They have a proven track record of installation in public spaces, and we will be leaning on them heavily throughout the installation process. Next slide. The artists are NEON Studio, pictured top right, and Frankie Boyle, pictured bottom right. Frankie is responsible for the light installations primarily, to clarify the role between the two. Next slide. So we're proposing this for Shoppers Plaza or the steps at Downtown Crossing. This is a public stage. We program it throughout the year with everything from fashion shows to musical performances to the kickoff of Harbor Fest at July 4th. It's really a gathering place in downtown Boston. Last year, when Echoes, a Voice from Uncharted Waters was there, we saw an estimated 218,000 people pass by that piece alone. This site is city-owned land, but it's primarily maintained by MP Boston and Millennium Tower. We have briefed representatives from them. They are thrilled to have this piece exhibited here. No further steps required on their end. And I can note that they shared a lot of positive feedback from the piece last year, and the residents in the tower loved having the art nearby. So they're excited to see the return. You can see here our holiday decorations that are on exhibit right now on the stage. The amount of people that can gather around to experience things that are on the stage for perspective. So here's a rendering of what it would look like. A human would come a little below the middle of the lantern. It's essentially, they're called petals. They start narrower at the bottom, are widest in the middle and then narrow a little at the top. Next slide. So some community engagement. I'm going to speak broadly to Winteractive 2024 and the planning process for 2025, because with so many pieces, it's really impossible to separate any given one. So throughout the tenure of 2024, we hosted 1 to 3 walking tours a week for specialty groups like the Boston Society of Architects. We hosted student classes, residence groups, hotel guests, and more. And we're already planning a robust series of tours next year. A vast majority of these, though, are free and open to the public and widely advertised for people to join. And this is a great way that we get feedback on what's most resonating with people, what they're enjoying. Myself or our president, Michael Nichols, lead the vast majority of them and capture feedback throughout that process. We worked with 21 site host partners last year to site artworks on their property. And I mentioned earlier, the 2 that are coming before you today are on public land, but the vast majority are on private land, which is why these 2 in particular are being shown. And so far this year, potential site host partners have been effusive about the impact they saw to the district last year with increased foot traffic. We did welcome several artists to the kickoff event last year so that they could speak to the public and guests about their work. And we've obtained funding this year from the Quebec Government Office and Canadian Consulate Office to make sure more artists can travel to Boston this year. And then throughout the year, we meet with residential groups, small and large businesses, college students, and our hotel partners to get feedback on how Winteractive can best support them and what sort of pieces most resonate with them. Next slide. So project schedule for Living Lantern. We anticipate install to begin Friday, the 10th of January and run through Monday, the 13th. We don't have any events planned for Living Lantern specifically, but again, we'll lead regular walking tours open to the public. And then de-installation will be after March 30th. And then the picture you saw on the last slide of the concrete thing being put in place is what you see in the bottom right here. They call it a ballast. This is the 2.5 ton weight that essentially holds the piece in place. To put that in perspective, last year Echoes was 5 tons. So, and we received the engineering studies to make sure that the stage could hold that. So very comfortable with 2.5 tons. As noted previously, it's a kinetic and light installation. And I'll show pictures of this in just a moment, but essentially the pedals are on these wooden frames, and then the light and sound equipment are secured inside the piece. It's almost impossible for someone to take a pedal off or to access any of the electrical infrastructure. And everything is strapped down to this concrete ballast, so it's very sturdy. And it has a proven track record in places like New York City. So we'll take 2 to 3 days to screw the pedals in place. And then it will be much faster to actually put the frames and strap them into the ballast. Each pedal goes between 2 wooden frames and gets screwed in. So again, you can't rip them out. We'll need a cherry picker and a forklift for equipment for the install. And we will work with the transportation department for a street occupancy permit for the delivery of the pallets for the artwork. For maintenance plan, the Downtown Boston Alliance has almost 50 ambassadors with a daily presence in this area, so they will flag any issues with the work. Our Director of Facilities and Operations can make simple repairs, and then for more complex repairs, Wireframe will travel to Boston. That's built into our contract with them. I've already spoken about the next 2 bullets. And then any snow removal will be performed with brooms by our staff. And we are already responsible for snow removal. So this isn't going to create any additional burden on another agency. Right. So that is Living Lantern.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. Really appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions or comments for Kelsey?
I just want to note that I really enjoyed the installations last year, and it's great to see more coming. So really excited to see this living lantern up.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other commissioners?
Kelsey, I have one question. I know you mentioned you were engaging somebody here in Boston. I think you mentioned a professor maybe. Could you say more about that? Just kind of curious about opportunities for individuals who are here, artists, whatnot, creatives in the city to kind of participate in the project. That's something that we think a lot about at the Boston Art Commission is so much of the work that we do is really creating opportunity for artists who are here in the city. So just kind of curious to hear a little bit more about that piece.
Yeah, sure. So one of the pieces for next year will be, it's already been painted by a professor at Boston University, and it was meant to play off the tie between Boston and Canada. And I can speak more broadly to throughout the year, the Alliance is committed to local artists. We currently, the piece that's being painted by the BU professor is replacing a mural that's done by Boston-based artist Michael Talbot. We rotate that mural annually, and when it's not Winteractive, it's almost exclusively local artists. We also have a temporary gallery in a vacant space on Winter Street right now featuring Michael Talbot and another local artist, and continue to plan to engage local artists. But for this year, since we are working with Canadian-based curatorial partners, the mural was where we saw the strongest room to commission a piece and bring in that local voice.
Cool, thank you. And it's exciting to see programming happening all year round outside. I think such an opportunity there. So congrats on last year and excited to see this year too.
Thank you.
Kelsey, I had a question about safety. I know this piece was installed in New York City. Have you or anyone involved in the project heard anything about members of the public trying to climb the piece? And I know you said you would have 50 ambassadors. I'm also just curious in the sort of early morning hours, potentially after bars close, if there will be security or people who do have their eye on the sculpture.
Yes,
In case.
Our ambassadors are almost 24 hours a day.
Okay.
I think there's only a 1 hour gap in there. We have multiple security cameras facing this piece. They're very visible. And the ambassadors are stationed, one at the Old State House and one at Summer Street. The hospitality ambassadors and then the cleaning ambassadors rove freely. So we have pretty regular eyes on this area. I think this piece would be extremely hard to climb the way the pedals are because they go up and outwards and then go inwards again. I think you would run into kind of barriers as you try to climb it. And while they're screwed in tightly, I don't think someone would have a lot of comfort that it would hold their weight, so they would get stopped quickly. But we also found with Echoes, people respected the piece, even though that was probably arguably more climbable. I never heard a single report of someone trying to climb hers.
Thanks, Kelsey. I'll now open it up to members of the public for any questions or comments. If anyone has their hand raised, just feel free to unmute and speak.
Hi. Yeah, I'd just like to say that as somebody who goes through Downtown Crossing frequently, I always enjoy seeing what's going on down there. The nutcrackers that are there currently gave me a big smile, and I look forward to seeing more work this winter, especially during the winter months when everything is cold and dreary. It's so lovely to have the art and interactions to work with, to view.
Thank you. And I'll note we're a proud partner of the Triennial as well. So we're excited to hopefully bring some art downtown in the future in partnership with them.
Anyone else? Well, would any commissioner like to make a motion to approve final design?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the final design for the living lantern sculpture.
Thanks, Diana. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thanks, James. Commissioners, after I say your name, please say yes if you approve the motion. James,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Abigail,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So the motion passes. And now, Kelsey, I will turn it again to you for the short-term installation by artist Brandon Vickerd, Alouette. Amber Torres will once again introduce this second project.
And just before we begin, I just want to remind everyone to keep their presentations between 5 to 7 minutes. We're just running on a little over. Thanks all.
Okay.
The only
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's all right. I just wanted to add a little bit of context and I'll hand it right over to you. Just want to thank our colleagues at the Boston Transportation Department for helping us navigate a really unique proposal at this site, which is going to be a roadway that's only open to pedestrians during the day. Anyone who spends a lot of time in downtown is familiar. But go ahead, Kelsey. I'll hand it over to you to present.
Great. So I'm going to be speaking to Alouette. It is meant to look like a satellite has fallen out of the sky and crashed on a car. It's a commentary on our obsession with technology, growing space waste, and meant to like kind of prompt people to stop and take a second look and think. This was curated in partnership with Exmora Arts Public. They last year assisted with several of the pieces in Winteractive, and we had a really fantastic experience working with them, so we're delighted to have them back this year. Next slide. The artist is Brandon Vickerd from Hamilton, Ontario. So we are proposing to site this. This address is likely going to change very slightly, which I'll get to in a moment when I talk about our conversations with the fire department. But the pedestrian zone essentially goes from the intersection of Washington and Summer to the Jewelers Building. So we have a very long stretch where it's wide and closed to vehicle traffic. Very heavily used by pedestrians and cyclists, only limited vehicle access. And it's, it says here 22 feet, we remeasured, it's actually 23 feet. And there's a full travel lane maintained throughout the exhibition. Since it is an active pedestrian street with limited vehicle traffic, we've been working closely with Boston Transportation Department. The commissioner and William Moose have both indicated their support of the project. They've actually joked that they want to put parking tickets on the car, which I think would be a really funny addition to it. So they've asked that we obtain approval from Public Works, which they've already granted, stating that they're confident in our maintenance capacity around the car since they already see our presence downtown. We have a meeting with Boston Police Department to brief them tomorrow, and we spoke with Boston Fire today, actually, and they indicated their support for the project. They've only asked that we move the car 15 to 20 feet away from a fire hydrant that's near where we were originally thinking to site it. I did have to submit a BTD permit for public art in complement to coming before you all this evening, which has been submitted. We need to receive BAC approval, and then we will submit a street occupancy permit as well. And then many of the businesses along this corridor that we hope to benefit from this are on our board or we have regular conversations with, and they've been briefed and confirmed their support of this in Winteractive more broadly. Next slide. So you can see here, this is my mock-up, exact location subject to change. Again, it might shift, but it gives you a sense of how wide the street is. And you can't quite tell here, but there's almost 18 feet of clearance next to the car where a fire truck could comfortably fit through. And this would be driving traffic to a stretch where we have a lot of different retail stores, which is part of why we wanted to site it here. Next slide. I'm gonna really skim over this because it's gonna be identical to before, but just wanted to give an example on the right of one of the flyers we had in the lobby of the Hyatt Regency to encourage tourists to come on this tour. And then we would also publicly advertise this beyond the hotel as well. So installation would begin on the 5th of January or possibly the 6th. That might shift a day, but it won't take any more than half a day. And then again, it would be taken down after March 30th. Next slide. So it was created in 2017. Materials include stainless steel to make the satellite, an indicator light, which you can see at the top, a battery to power that light, which is not the car battery. It's a battery that's stored in the trunk of the car. And then we will purchase a used car for the purpose of this exhibition, and it must be one of the 3 kinds noted below. And there's some specifications from the artist about making sure the color is complementary to the satellite. For example, I suspect we would not want a white or gray car, light gray car, as the satellite wouldn't pop as much. Next slide. So we will obtain one of those 3 kinds of cars. Then we will use tools to shape the hood of the car per the artist specifications, and XMRO staff will be on site for this process. We will affix it to the hood of the car with braces and connect to the battery in the trunk, and then it will be placed on Washington Street. We will immediately have signage put up for this and Living Lantern and all Winteractive pieces, making sure the public understand why it's there. We have a 4-sided cube that's a map of all the pieces, a panel with information about the exhibit, a panel with specific information about the signage. And then we are likely going to unveil a panel this year that's about the ties between Boston and Quebec. Next slide. And then I don't believe any of these notes are different than Living Lantern, except that instead of calling wireframe, we would call XMRO for more complex repairs. But again, that's built into our contract with them. So that is all.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. Commissioners, any questions, comments? Any members of the public with any questions or comments? Well, hearing none, I'm curious if a commissioner would like to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the temporary artwork.
Thanks so much, Diana. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Brian. Commissioners, after I say your name, please say yes if you agree with the motion. James?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Abigail?
I'll abstain on this one.
If we have an abstention, does that, we don't have a quorum? Is that correct?
To have the, all right, so sorry, we're going to talk this through. To have the meeting, we need a quorum of the members, but I think we need a majority. Like I think Abigail could be, could vote no, for example, and still it would go to the majority.
The majority of people who are here as part of the quorum.
I think so. We can double check this, but that is my understanding, that we need a quorum of members to be here, and the votes would be a majority of the people present.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But
So,
we can double check that and follow up.
Sure. Abigail, go ahead.
Yeah, and my understanding, Karen, is that that would be protocol.
Thanks.
To clarify, Abigail, will you be abstaining or voting no?
I'm abstaining.
And I vote yes. So the motion passes. Kelsey, thank you so much. Excited to see these projects installed in Downtown Crossing, and thanks so much for sharing all of this.
Yes, thank you all. And if you would like a tour of Winteractive once it's all up, please let me know. I'm happy to take any of you.
Thanks so much. We now move to Heroes, a long-term mural at Hugh O'Donnell Elementary School, and Liza Quinones from the city of Boston will introduce.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner. The Canvas of Culture call to artists was released earlier this year in February. And after an extensive artist selection and community engagement process with MOAC, the BAC, and our partners from Boston Public Schools, we commissioned 12 artists for mural projects at 9 schools, 5 of which were successfully installed and accessioned in this September. And now I'm excited to continue the work and present for final design review an exterior mural at the Hugh O'Donnell Elementary School in East Boston by artist Sophy Tuttle. Sophy is a well-established artist and muralist locally based in Medford. Her murals can be seen throughout Greater Boston, nationally and internationally. Sophy's mural, Heroes for the O'Donnell, will be the highlight of the school's newly renovated playground on 3 walls spanning a little over 100 feet wide and 12 feet high. This artwork will replace existing murals that have long been in disrepair on freshly patched, repaired, and scraped walls from our friends from BPS facilities. And this mural is slated for installation in April of 2025. Thematically, the O'Donnell School expressed interest in artwork that embodies strength and resilience, drawing from the rich stories of the local Eagle Hill Latino community, primarily from South and Central America. It was essential for the artwork to be bilingual, reflecting the neighborhood's Spanish-speaking roots, and to incorporate elements of community engagement. Sophy participated in robust community and school engagement consisting of art workshops with students and went through about 3 rounds of artwork design. The project materials and logistics for installation have also been reviewed by our partners at BPS facilities. And with us today in support of this project are Jake Lacey and Fabrice Felix from BPS Strategic Facility Initiatives and Claudia Pulgarin from the O'Donnell. So I will now introduce Sophy, who will present her final design. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liza. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me here. Thank you for choosing me for this project. I'm really excited to get it started. As Liza kind of mentioned, I'm a local artist. I live in Medford, English-born American muralist. I make installations, and my work celebrates nature and reconsiders our position in the web of life. Next slide. I have over 20 murals in the greater Boston area, so I'm well established around here. I've painted nationally and internationally, including in Mexico, Colombia, and England. These are a few of the paintings I did this year. Next slide. My process is kind of what you see is what you get as far as my sketch goes. So the design on the left is the final sketch that I presented to the client, and then the picture on the right is the final painting. So it's pretty accurate to the sketch as far as final design versus what you're presenting, what I'm presenting. So the site is the Hugh O'Donnell Elementary School. It's located on, or the entrance is located on Trenton Street in East Boston. The mural will go where this green line is on the picture on the left. So it spans all the way down the entrance corridor and then along a little bit of the playground as well. And the picture on the right is a rendering of how the new playground is going to be placed and built. So the kids haven't had a playground in a long time, so they're very excited to have this whole renovation come together. Next slide. These are pictures of the current mural. So as you can see, the wall needs a little bit of love. It is chipping and flaking, but we are working with the folks who are working on the playground to be able to get that surface completed and ready for me to come paint on it. Next slide. So the concept that I came up with for this school, it represents the students. So the students are a lot of Spanish. It's a lot of Spanish-speaking folks, people from different communities all over the world, but mostly Latin America and South America. So I chose to represent that the students and the faculty through the flora and fauna that reminds them of their home, whether that's another country, whether that's Eagle Hill, whatever they call home. And throughout the design, I'm highlighting the school's 4 major guiding principles, which are humanity, empathy, respect, and opportunity. And that'll be in both English and Spanish, as you'll see. And then there's also a special section at the beginning to honor Sadie, who was a cherished student in the community who passed away in a fire last year. So for my public engagement, I went to the school and I did this workshop activity in both English and Spanish. I asked the kids to write in their name, where do they call home, and then draw a plant or an animal or illustrate a song that reminds them of home. And then for the older kids, I asked them to do 3 words that describe the O'Donnell community. So as you can see here, there's a few different samplings of what kids came up with. So this is the design that I came up with. It's a long, skinny design. So one wall will be facing one way and then it'll kind of wrap around. And the kind of black and white piece on the bottom section is the bleachers that will be installed there. So I think there's another picture that makes that a little more clear, but that's just to show that will be blocked off. Next. So the first wall that goes along the corridor going into the playground, this starts with the tribute to Sadie. She loved pink, bubbles, and butterflies, so I included all of those things. And then there's the 2 banners with humanity, humanidad, empatía, and empathy. There were a lot of students from El Salvador, from Colombia, from Honduras. So those three countries are represented by either the national bird or flower. And the staff of the school also shared an interest with me about having a human element in it as well, and like the students helping one another. So I included these hands kind of reaching for each other. I think that's it for this one. And then the next wall that wraps around includes respeto, respect, oportunidad, and opportunity. And it features the mascot of the school, which is the otters. And probably about 90% of the students said something about soccer. So there's a huge soccer element, and it's also right in front of where the soccer pitch is. There's the national bird of Guatemala, and the Mexican community is represented by the marigold. Yeah, I think that's it. The fabrication installation process, there'll be like light sanding and chip removal as required, although I believe that's going to be covered by the school before we get there. But if there's anything for me to do afterwards, I'll be able to do that. I'll prime it with Loxon concrete primer from Sherwin-Williams. I'll be using golden mural paint with some aerosol paint, probably Montana and Flame or Cobra. And then the final step will be a clear coat called Mural Shield to protect it from all the soccer balls and everything that it's going to get hit with. The timeline, I think it will be about 3 weeks. Tentatively starting in April. We're still kind of working on that. It's also still based on the construction, but hopefully it'll be ready by then. My maintenance recommendations are light power washing once a year. For the first 5 years, I'll be available for touch-ups for normal wear and tear. I mean, I can see that happening with the students playing out there. So I'll be available to be called back and work on stuff. Larger damage, if there's like a big chunk taken out, we can kind of assess that as needed. And then after 5 years, we can talk about a new touch-up schedule or a rate that for like as needed repairs. And that's the presentation. That's pretty much everything. Yeah, thank you.
Sophie, thank you so much. I really appreciate this and all the work you've put into bringing this presentation to us and the design elements. I will turn it to commissioners first, but one thing I wanted to share was I really, really appreciate how you approach the community engagement and the questions of home, what does home mean, as well as what the community values in the Hugh O'Donnell School. And additionally, I've seen some of your murals around town and they're insanely gorgeous, truly, truly beautiful. And I love the cohesion that you can sort of create with all of these disparate elements. And as I look at this particular mural, one thing that I'm struck with is I don't quite see the same sort of narrative capability that you've created in some of these other murals. And what I'm wondering is if there's a way for you to put more of you in this work that you're creating. I mean, I know you've had these sessions and conversations with students, and I feel like there's a lot of disparate elements that you've created across this long, skinny wall, which I know is probably difficult to design. But I just wonder if there's a way to incorporate maybe a more cohesive element, maybe a more narrative element to the design that you've created. Those are just my thoughts, but I'd love to open it up to any other commissioners for questions or comments to Sophy. Anyone?
I just want to comment on the sort of commemoration of the student that was lost. I think that was such a special touch to the mural itself. And I just wonder, is that something that is just sort of, will that be reflected at all in like the plaque that accompanies the mural, or how will you acknowledge that particular piece?
I think we can discuss that with the school. I know that they were really adamant that we don't make it like a central theme of the mural, like not putting her name in, not putting a portrait of her in. They just kind of wanted like a nod to her to have. I think it's more for the staff to like, they will always know about it. But I mean, if they want that, I'm happy to include that in the final write-up. I think it's kind of, I'll let them drive that because it's their community, you know.
Thank you, Sylvie.
I wonder if any other commissioners have any comments, questions, suggestions.
I'd like to respond to your comment, John.
Sure.
So one thing that strikes me about your murals, Sophy, and this one too, to some extent, is their coherence and lack of clutter. And we often see murals in which, especially for schools, in which so much needs to be included that it becomes very crowded. And I appreciate the relative clarity and unclutteredness of your design, particularly as we look here to the one on top that's not obscured by the bleachers. And I understand your question and kind of request, John. But if you do decide to go in that direction, I would really encourage you to, if you add any element of your own, to remove another element or to make sure that you retain a kind of clarity that's a hallmark of your very beautiful style.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abigail. I'm curious for other commissioners, and just thinking about the design, if anyone shares a sort of similar sentiment. I just know that this is a really prominent wall, and Sophy, I really, really love and admire your work. And so I for me personally feel that like it just needs a little bit more tweaking. And I'm curious if any other commissioners sort of share that sentiment, because I think this can be extraordinarily beautiful with maybe just a little bit more thought put into those design elements, as Abigail said. And sort of how all of those thematic elements and the work you've done with the students fit together.
I'll just jump in and say I understand and can see your perspective on this, John, but I also see Abigail's perspective as well. And so my feeling is Sophy, taking that feedback, needs to decide or figure out if she's going to do anything more or if this is what she really wants to paint. So I didn't help you there, but I didn't hurt you there in terms of your your thoughts, John. But I just want to say I can see both points of view, but I think in the end, Sophy and the community need to agree and recommend.
I'm wondering if we can jump back to the slide that had the side by side of the rendering with the actual painted mural. No, of the example of the sample. Back a little bit more here. So here, I'm wondering if what we're missing here is some of the kind of energy of what the brush strokes look like, and you know, what the movement actually looks like once the artwork moves from a digital piece to a sort of living mural that lives on a wall within a community. And whether that's sort of lost in translation on a digital mock-up versus what you see and feel when you see something in real life.
Could we go back to the mural mock-up?
I think when we were reviewing this before, Liza, I think John, if I remember when I was looking at it, that I don't think it was so much a translation from digital to real life, but maybe the addition of so many elements. So Abigail, I think the concern was actually speaking to the point you had of it being like almost so much. And Sophie, some of your other works seem the elements have been selected with a little bit more thought to design, whereas here I think we're seeing sometimes when artists are working with schools or communities, there's so much respect and intention to include everyone's perspective that your artistic voice is getting a little bit lost. And I believe that is the point that John was trying to make about, like, yes, to include all these beautiful things, but how do you keep sort of your touch in there and your guidance of the content to still, you know, feel like one of your artworks?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one maybe important thing to point out is that you won't see this entire mural all at once at the same time because of how long and skinny it is. So I don't think when you're looking at it, like, you won't see it one upon the other like this. It's kind of an experience as you're walking down a long skinny hallway or alleyway. And then the second mural is what you see kind of all together, but you wouldn't really see them both at the same time. So maybe you wouldn't be as overwhelmed by all the different elements. I think my second point was going to be similar to what Liza was saying, is that it does, I mean, it's not an exact printer when I make a so I think where my hand comes in is actually in the painting of it and making the decisions of what gets softened and what gets pushed into the background element and what gets brought forward and highlighted. So I think the story gets told as things come back and forth in the way that I create the design. Like, so for example, the parts in the background, the circles or the like leaves and stuff, I think those will probably end up getting kind of pushed back so that the main characters can jump forward in kind of a rhythm that you can understand. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was thinking as you guys were discussing that.
Yeah, I think too, you know, we're, I think, looking at images that are kind of render or like photographs, right? That I think you've used to kind of compose the image. And I think the translation, kind of to Liza's point, from that more kind of photographic quality to the painterly quality in the actual kind of creation of the piece itself, I think will be satisfying and maybe help a little bit with what you're saying, John. But I actually quite, like the pieces. I think considering the site, a mural that's bright and vibrant and active seems really appropriate, for a schoolyard. So I'm a fan.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? I now move it to any members of the public that would like to make a question, ask a question, or make a comment.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jake Lacey, Assistant Director with the Facilities Management Department for BPS. Thank you, Liza, for the introduction. And I honestly have the absolute pleasure of letting you all know that BPS Facilities Management fully supports this mural. We are very, very appreciative for Sophy for the hard work she did and will do for the O'Donnell community. The two focuses, of course, that facilities management has is one, the materials and what will be going, into these spaces and the intentionality there. But more importantly, honestly, is just once again, the intentionality that Sophy had for these students. And of course, we'll defer to you all as the commission for form, function, how it's all supposed to shape up. But I think we really, really appreciate what Sophy's kind of embodied here for these students. So just once again, full support, really excited to, when the time comes, support Sophy to get this mural on this wall. So thank you.
Thanks, Jake. So with that, I'm curious if any commissioner would like to make a motion to approve final design, or if we are curious if we should ask Sophy to think through the design and come back. I would leave that to you, commissioners.
I guess maybe, John, a question would be if we feel appropriate to move forward with a motion, but require maybe one level of kind of staff check-in if there's any additional kind of work that Sophy does after commission vote. Karen, do you think that's appropriate? And John, would you feel good about that?
I think for this, Brian, if we decide, like if she wants to think about it, think about the elements that she's included here and either keep this design or reconfigure them in some way, I don't think we would vote today because the timeline is such that it would give us an opportunity to see a new design if Sophy chooses to do that in February, or we can approve it as is today. So I'm just curious to get a bit of a consensus from the commissioners, what direction they'd like to go in.
I'd actually be interested to hear from you, Sophy, your response, like after hearing the comments and conversation, would you, how do you feel? Do you feel strongly that this is where your design lies and you want to move forward with it? Do you feel like you'd like to simplify it a little bit and make it a little bit more your own? What's your feeling?
I would say for a project with so much community input, I actually feel really good about how much of my hand will be in this. I feel like it's plants and animals and bright colors, and that's what makes me happy. So I'm happy with it. I do think it's hard to look at a little rendering and imagine it as a 100-foot long mural. And just kind of, I don't know, reiterate the things I said before about I'll make small decisions on the wall to kind of push the story. I appreciate the comment about the storytelling, and I have that in mind when I'm working. So I do hold that as I'm working, I guess.
In that case, I'd like to submit a motion to support approval of Sophy Tuttle's mural at the O'Donnell School.
Thanks, Abigail. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Brian. Commissioners, after I say your names, please say yes if you approve of the motion. James?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Abigail?
Yes.
And with very, very deep respect for the artist's work and the amount of effort put into it, I vote no. But the motion passes. So congratulations, Sophy. Very excited to see this come together. And I'm actually very excited to see these flourishes that you include as you create this mural on the wall of the Hugh O'Donnell School. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And we'll now move on to our final presentation this evening at the DeWitt Playground, artwork created by Marlon Forrester and Studio Luz. This work was presented previously for final design review, and the team is here today to share the design revisions that have been made. Birgit, I realize I'm reading what you should be saying, so I don't know if I want to pass it to you to just give another introduction.
Yeah, I'll just carry on that. Thank you, Commissioner. This project has been seen before for final design, but design revisions have been made since that time. So we're excited to see this project moving forward and to present the project for a vote on the revised final design. So I'll hand it off to the DeWitt Playground team.
Thank you so much, Birgit. Good evening, commissioners and the whole public on the call. Studio Luz, in collaboration with Marlon Forrester, were selected to work. I don't know if everyone can hear me, by the way. Sorry about that. Great. Studio Luz, in collaboration with Marlon Forrester, was selected to work on the DeWitt Playground renovations. The playground is a vital public space, and it provides an important recreational outlet for the surrounding community. And the concept that we came up with, the P.L.A.Y, Learn, Athletic, and Youth redesign project proposal, incorporates sustainable and socially responsible design that provides a new way of looking at how we use the public spaces and the basketball courts in this area. I'll pass it over to Marlon to kind of like take us through the initial design process.
Yeah, hi. Welcome all. I wanted to first say that it's been an absolute pleasure to take part in this process in terms of designing a space for the public. So the initial concept was Play, Learn, Athletic, Youth, which is really looking at how young people and how people interact in play spaces where they can incorporate ideas around history, cultural history, which is regional, which is local, and then how to kind of use those images to allow young people who engage or anyone walking within the space to understand what is the cultural history of that space? How is that effective? So I was able to receive this commission, Public Arts Commission, in 2019 prior to COVID, which is a long time, right? So we've continued through that time to continue to push forward. There was a COVID and there was kind of a slowdown during that process, and then we're able to kind of pick up pieces. Initially, we were super engaged and locked in. We did a community outreach to the Madison Park Housing Development, which is also connected to the DeWitt Center, which is an active community engagement space. I being a teacher in the Boston area, a lot of my students utilize that space. And also I myself, being raised in Boston, have utilized that DeWitt space. I think even this year, they still have the B&BL tournaments on the courts in which we're actively engaging and transforming. So through that process, obviously there were some community meetings.
Next slide, please.
Yep. Thank you. There are some community meetings. Madison Park is very closely connected to the space. Northeastern is not too far from it. And those developments in the general area really kind of anchors this space in a really engaging space. Nubian Square is close to, so Nubian Market. So for that Roxbury area, it was really perfectly located in terms of not only looking at the gentrification that was happening in the area, but also thinking about what are the different culture and races that have been incorporated into the place to really build up the history of it. Next slide. So once again, we're talking about play spaces. We're also thinking about health, wellness, and intergenerational space. So thinking about it from a perspective of Afrofuturism, right? Thinking about it as a space in which we utilize the actual geometric shape, geometric forms from the actual basketball court and turn those into built structures, sculptural forms, historical forms, and these forms are also related directly to the activity that happens there at the court. Ideas around Black masculinity, around collective community and collective consciousness and play as community as an effective way. We can continue on. So currently the space has been transformed in terms of it's gone through a rehab. And so I think, the public arts can speak to that. They've inlaid and they've transformed it, but the art hasn't been incorporated into the space. So that's kind of the next set, and that's the site location. We initially had 4 different concepts. We had the mirror of history, we had the fence of history, we had the sidelines, we had shaped canopies, and we had another design that we did not incorporate. So these are the 4, the fence of history. These are the 3 that we were able to actually use and incorporate into the space.
And just for clarification, the fence of history was taken out from our last BAC review.
Yeah. And I really loved it. It dealt with the idea of thinking about these cultural heroes from a human perspective, when one could actually look at their physical dynamic, their height, and be able to walk physically in their footsteps, looking at the outline of the form of their body in a way of understanding that in a human form, their impact and the gravitas behind them and their history.
Right. And so these are some of the site conditions that we had to kind of consider as we were designing these elements. Next slide, please. So this is our mirror of history. So the play concept was conceived through these installations, and one of them is the mirror of history, which sustainably uses the existing fence frame that is existing on the courts to create a display of historical leaders, both local to Boston and those from across the country. On the next page, we have all the leaders that are featured on the mirror of history. We're currently going through the process of getting license approvals to use these images. We have about 65% of the images license approved. So we're kind of continuing with that process. Next slide, please. So these are some of the comments that we received from the last commission review, mostly about kind of like repositioning some of these images to address the violent cropping that was kind of like identified, and also understanding the weathering of the materials over time. And considering these comments, next slide, please, we readjusted the images to make sure that we address those comments. And this is kind of like the new layout that we're working with. If you go on the next slide, again, the mirror of history is made of stainless steel perforated panels, and some are solid reflective panels. And these reflective panels are meant to kind of like allow people to almost see themselves as a part of the mural as well with the historical leaders. Next slide, please. And these are kind of like the smaller details showing how these images will be seen much more in detail in person. Next slide, please. And then these are some of kind of like the maintenance recommendations that we've been working on with our contractor. The support structure made of marine grade 2-part epoxy on top of galvanized steel with an expected lifespan of 25 years. Power washing is not recommended. Vandalism and graffiti should be routinely checked, obviously. And the overall installation could easily be touched up. And then for the printed panels, for the image side, the finish will be a Supreme Clear Coat with UV lamination, as well as with UV lamination and also anti-graffiti properties. And obviously it's easy to wash it off using diluted dish soap with a soft cloth and wash away with clean water. And then for the backside, there's a Pro Industrial acrylic eggshell finish. And it would be best to use products such as Goof Off and Simple Green to clean off the graffiti. Otherwise, kind of like this is kind of the summary of the materials and maintenance recommendations that we've been working with our contractor to make sure that we provide to the city. Next slide, please. And then for the sidelines, here we have the artwork, and I'll call on Marlon to kind of like go through and talk about this really incredible artwork.
On the outer peripheries of the court are the actual pattern itself and sequence is derived from the geometry inside of the court itself. So in a way, it's a kind of amalgamation, an idea that once again, when we think about the history of America and we think about African American and culture, Black culture, the way that we use pattern and symbols, whether it's sonically, whether it has to do with music, these are ways in which we create a new sense of language. So these geometric forms function as symbol, but also as language as well. Really morphing together the play, the culture in one.
Next slide, please. And again, the maintenance recommendations for the sidelines, no power washing, and we do not expect any vehicle traffic around this area, but bikes are fine. Surface dirt can easily be hosed off, and the painting could be easily touched up. Next slide, please. So we have the shaded canopies here, and these are the locations in relation with the sidelines where these shaded canopies are going to be placed at. And for the next slide, again, we addressed some of these earlier comments from the commission, which were mainly about the placement of the canopies, mainly about the locations, making sure that we do not block any existing pathways and prevent any unintended paths or crossing of paths, which we did with these new locations. Next slide, please. Making sure that the canopies almost act as gateways to the courts. Obviously, there's going to be some relocating of the existing benches to allow for these new locations where the shaded canopies are. And again, next slide. Due to the relocation, there's going to be some surface treatment where the asphalt is going to be taken out for the shaded canopies to be placed in, and some new asphalt to be added. Next slide, please. And this is kind of like the plan view of the shaded canopies, again, playing off of the artwork from Marlon, the movement of kind of like those sidelines becoming these physical structures, as you can see. Next slide, please. And you can see the structures. It's 4-inch square tube stainless steel tubing with the shading made of perforated stainless steel panels. Again, making sure that these physical structures are kind of like humanizing those motions of the sidelines. Next slide. Again, the maintenance recommendations. The finish is finishing on the structure of the shaded canopies in marine grade 2-pot epoxy on top of galvanized steel. Expected lifespan of about 25 years. Power washing again is not recommended. And vandalism and graffiti should be routinely checked. And again, the structures can easily be touched up. And on the next slides, we can see the existing conditions and the areas where surface treatment will be required to accommodate the shaded canopies. And then the next slides, you can see the rendering for, next slide, please. Yes, you can see the rendering for one of the shaded canopies on the sidelines. Next slide. And then coming from DeWitt Drive, you can see one of those shaded canopies kind of like acting as a gateway to the basketball courts. And the next rendering, next slide, you can see kind of like the view of the Mirror of History as a backdrop to those basketball courts. And then for the next slide, you can see some of the site work and preparations that would be required. We've been working together with our contractor to make sure that we kind of like get this information for the commission. There's not a lot of machine work apart from the small excavator for the shaded canopy foundations, as well as 10K loft forklift to make sure that we carry in some of these materials for the installations. And then for the next slide, you can see the overall project schedule. Again, design started all the way back in July of 2021. Right now, we're in the process of prefabrication and fabrication. Some of those elements are working in parallel, and we're expecting to be kind of like done with the fabrication coming June 2025 and construction to be done by August of 2025. Thank you so much, and we're happy to hear your comments.
Thank you so much, Marlon, Joshua, everyone at Studio Luz. This is such an ambitious project, and it's great to see the incorporation of everything that was discussed at previous BAC meetings. So much appreciation there. I turn it over to members of the commission for any questions or comments they might have for you. I would say one slight concern I have, you mentioned that you have license rights for 65% of the images, but not yet all of the images. If I could ask Karen or Paul or any member of MOAC, could we approve pending sort of 100% image licensing?
Yeah, I wonder
how
if you
would we
could
move forward with that?
I wonder if you could approve only those that have been secured.
Because I do think, Marlon and Joshua, that we will need 100% licensing approval for this project.
Right. And that's something that we're currently working with our partners, making sure that we acquire all those licenses. We're hoping by this early January 2025, we'll be able to acquire most of them. It's just right now the holiday season kind of like got in the way as well. But we've been hearing back from a lot of the people that we reached out to, the copyrights holders, for a lot of those images. So right now it's kind of like we've made contact, we've heard back from them. It's kind of like on their end, waiting to hear back that, hey, you can use the images.
Yeah, John, I do think that we can't approve the ones that we don't have permission for. Joshua, Marlon, I don't know what your thoughts are there, but I'm sure you don't want to put anyone up without consent either. So I think we're probably all in alignment here. So I think we're just trying to make sure that we have a lot of clarity in the language that we use. And this is, I'll just say this is coming up in other projects as well. And, you know, we do want to make sure that no one ends up seeing an artwork with their face or their relative's face that they didn't expect.
Right.
And not just for legal reasons, right? We want to be mindful of making sure, even if it were in the public domain, right, that people know and aren't caught off guard and they feel that they're not being exploited in any way for you know, a peace commission by the city.
Right.
Yep. I completely understand.
Any other commissioner comments? I now open it up to members of the public if they'd like to make a comment or ask a question.
John, I was gonna make a comment and then you moved on, but my question is following up with Karen, if we can only approve the images that you currently have permission for, is there a next step if they get the permission after the fact, or how do we move forward with that, or do we wait until we have 100%?
I think the issue will be, and I guess this question goes back to Marlon and Joshua, like what happens if you don't get the permissions? Like what would your design plan be? And would you send us or like want to come back with something? Like could we approve this with the understanding that this is approved if and only if you get all of those permissions, and then if you don't, you come back to us?
Yes, that's for the latter. I think this would be approved with condition that we're coming back with 100% approvals. That is something that we are diligently working on, and we wanted to make sure that we have those license approvals by the start of next year, because with fabrication, we wanted to make sure that as fabrication comes to a close, we also have those approvals acquired. So I would go for the latter.
Yeah, and I'll say, commissioners, you know, this is a project that we're presenting to you from our office. So, you know, Birgit could lift some of the presentation work. So, you know, and if we have updates, we could bring those to you and present them for your approval. If there's like a design change or an update, we could bring it into you for a vote and not have Marlon and Studio Lose Joshua and others need to make the whole presentation again if it is a pretty minor change which would require your review.
Thanks for clarifying, Karen. I wonder if would it make sense for the motion to approve final design with the exception of Mirror of History, and then we can come back once we have 100% approval of those images? Would that be a comfortable way to move forward?
That feels right to me, John.
Okay.
Just question, when you say mirror history, I understand where you're coming from. You're really talking about the images. So you're also saying that if there are some modifications to the images, meaning that the ones that we don't receive approval for, we can then take those out of the design and then resubmit seeking approval.
Yeah, with alternate images or something like that. And to Karen's point, I don't even know if you would need to come and present for that. You would just need to pass it on, and maybe Birgit could present this, because I think we've seen the design and I think we would approve it. We just need assurance that you have those image licenses.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
So let's see. I move that we approve final design of the project at Madison Park Athletic Complex with the exception of Mirror of History, which will be represented once 100% image licensing has been procured. Do I hear a second?
You hear a second.
Thanks, James. Commissioners, after I say your name, please say yes if you agree with the motion. James,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Abigail,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So the motion passes. And Joshua and Marlon, good luck with the rest of those images.
Yeah.
We'll
Thank
be
you so
very
much,
excited to
commissioners.
see them again. But yeah, really, really great work. I know this has been a long, long road and a long process, but excited to see it come together.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Karen, for your
Yeah.
support throughout the process.
Thank you, Birgit, as well.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
And now,
Bye.
final order of business is a motion to adjourn. James, do you want to do the honors as usual?
Yes, I will make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thanks, James. Do I have a second?
John, sorry to interrupt. Before that, there would be the motion if you wanted to move the next meeting of the BAC to February instead of January.
Oh, sure. We haven't had a motion ever to do that.
It's just a request.
I don't know if we need a motion as much as maybe consent, or like understanding.
I guess to put out there that we typically don't have a January meeting, so we're hoping that we won't have a January meeting this year and we'll reconvene in February. Does that seem reasonable to other commissioners?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. The team appreciates it because otherwise they'd be in meetings throughout the holidays and New Year, preparing for that.
So going back to the motion to adjourn, did I get a second for that? Would anyone like to second?
I'm happy to second a motion to adjourn.
Okay, thanks, Abigail. Commissioners, after I say your name, please say yes if you agree. James,
I agree, yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Abigail,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Thanks, everyone. I know it was a slightly long meeting and pushed later, but I really appreciate it. I think we had a really productive meeting, lots of great projects. So thank you for your work. Thank you to all the artists for their projects. And I hope everyone has a wonderful end of December. Happy holidays to everyone, and see you in February.
Thank you all.
Holidays.
Thank you.